Archives episode. This episode, I would say, has probably the most lore ever in like the history of me listening to these, which only consists of season 1. This one has the most lore, I'm pretty sure. It's called Distortion. It's given by Sasha, who works at the Institute, and that she's an assistant archivist. She's the one who gives her beautiful voice on the statement today. So at the very beginning, like, Sasha and John kind of go back and forth because John's like, are you sure you want to do this? And Sasha's like, yeah, of course I'll do it. Like, Martin's my buddy and he did it and he was fine. He did it literally right afterward. And he was like, well, Martin didn't get any injuries. And Sasha's like, okay, it's a little scratch. I'm fine. Like, it's whatever. And he's like, okay, fine. If you want to do it, we do it. And then they start the fucking statement. So she starts off by basically saying that even though she is one of the assistant archivists, she was always really skeptical about all of this shit that happened. And so because she's so skeptical of everything, she kind of didn't really believe a lot of the things that happened, even when she looked through the statements. And when she looked at Martin's statement, she kind of didn't believe it and didn't really take Jane Apprentice's like existence as a real thing, because they really question Martin's self-preservation, which I think is so funny because Tim's just a guy. Like, he does funny things. Like, he did an April Fool's prank, which they didn't even talk about, but they only mentioned like once super vaguely. He did an April Fool's prank. He's just a guy. She also makes note that she lives in like a super quirky building, and every time she would have to go to the archive, she would see like the silver little worms and she would stomp on them every time because ew, they're disgusting. If you guys remember from the Jane Prentice episode review. And essentially because she lives in this quirky building, in the hallways they have like this weird glass that has bubbles in it. And in the bubbles, as she was like going down the stairs doing her little routine of looking out the window, she looks out the window and she sees like this tall starky guy that looks like he has no bones in his body, and his hands are like, his fingers are like super sharp and long, look like it has no bones in it. And she's like super fucking creeped out. Like, she's so fucking creeped out. And she's like, what the fuck? So she looks on the other side of it, on the side that isn't the bubble, and she just sees a tall blonde guy who's just sitting there looking at the flowers with a flower lady. She's like super skeptical and she's like, what the fuck? So she goes out there, she talks to the flower lady, she's like, hey, did you see that super weird like blonde dude? And she's like, yeah, but he wasn't like super weird at all. And she's like, okay. So that was sighting number 1. Sighting number 2 was at a small cafe. So she likes to go to this cafe before she gets to work on her way to the Victoria line. And the cafe that she stops at, she stops at this cafe because it's cheaper and it's on the more budget side, because the archive that she works at is more expensive. So she doesn't really like that one, which, fair girl. We all need a nice cup of coffee that isn't fucking $10 or whatever. And she looks inside and she sees the tall blonde guy sitting in the corner with his coffee, and she's like, what the fuck? But she brushes it off. She's like, 2 times a coincidence, 3 times, then that's when we'll go up and we'll confront this guy. Where she kind of talks about like there wasn't really much happening, so she didn't really want to like tell of anything that was happening, because she said that Jonathan and Tim were having an argument over some like archaeologist or something like that, and basically that it was a quiet day until Martin came up and was like, I just saw a silver worm, and everyone was trying to look for the silver worm, which John says, and I quote, because I have quotes, I promise, if anything weird happens, it always happens to Martin. Which I hate, because I hate the dynamic that they have. I think that Martin's such a great person, but that's my own biased opinion. You guys should tell me your favorite characters down below too. But anyway, sighting number 3 was when she was on her way back from work. She actually saw the same guy in the same cafe that was open, which she was a bit surprised because they're not normally open. There was no one behind the register, but the light was on. The guy was in there in the same exact position with the same exact fucking cup of coffee that's now fucking dry. Then she looks around to see if anyone's like around her, so she's like not the only person looking at this. And then she sees like this car drive by with tinted windows, and she can see the reflection of that guy that she saw in the bubble before, so she's like creeped the fuck out. And then she looks back and she sees a guy staring at her and gesturing for her to come in. So she comes in and she's like a little nervous, but she's got the confidence just because she's such a big, great girl. So she walks in, she sits down, and he's just sitting there waiting on her to ask a question. And she's like, what the fuck? So she asks him, she's like, what are you? And he starts laughing, and he's like, I can't even describe what I am. Like, this guy's so chill. I'm like, what the fuck? And she's like, okay, what do you want? He's like, well, I want to help you. And she's like, and even John cuts in, he's like, help with what? Like, what is he trying to help with? And she was like, are you trying to help with Jane Prentice? And he started laughing, and he was like, no, I care about the flesh hive. I don't care if you and your friends die. So then he takes her hand and his hand, and she's feeling it. And she's like, oh, this feels weird. Like, it feels heavy. And she described it as it felt heavy, like a box of super fucking sharp, like, stones. And she was like, oh, I don't like this. So she jumped back. She ran towards the door, and the guy didn't move at all. He just simply said, if you want to save Jonathan, Martin, Tim, like, named all of their names, like, first and last name, which, fucking hell, that's crazy. He was like, if you want to save all of their lives, then you'll come and meet me at this fucking cemetery. And she was like, so then even John cuts in, and he's like, you said all of our fucking names? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, ooh, that's a bit fucking weird, which, fair, I think it's fucking weird too. And then they kind of talk a little bit about Martin's April Fool's joke super vaguely, which I feel like they should have went into more detail about, but it's fine. And then after that, she said that she didn't mention it to John or anything because she knew that John would just tell her to not go. She goes to the cemetery anyway, and before she can even get through the gate to the graveyard, he's already sitting there waiting for her. Michael, the tall fucking blonde guy. And he takes her down the block to an abandoned pub, which is fucking weird. And they go inside of this abandoned pub. She goes into like this abandoned pub, and she hears like a whimpering on the other side of the room while she's taking notes of like things on the bar. And she turns around and she's like, okay. So she turns around and she goes to the other side of the bar, and she looks and she sees this like male thing. She makes this big gasp sound because she sees all the silver worms and everything. And then the male snaps its head towards her and like lets out like opens its mouth like it's gonna scream, but nothing came out, and all these silver worms started coming towards her. She backed up into the tub, like she fell into the tub. She was reaching out for things. She grabbed a fire extinguisher and she extinguished them all away, which they actually hate apparently. Like, they're absolutely repulsed to it, to the point where like she got to the guy with her fire extinguisher in her hand, to the point where he was whimpering and everything. She feels a sharp pain in her fucking shoulder, and it's this big stocky guy. But John did want to say that after he heard about the Timothy Hodge guy, he was a little sad to hear about it, because apparently right after his statement, that's when he passed away, which I'm gonna do my research after this, but I am not sure. Anyways, and apparently he is a little skeptical of the fact that they want to, like, you know, help. Like, the creature wants to help them. You think that's a little weird, which is fair because they're normally antagonists, so the fact that a fucking creature wants to help is fucking weird. Anyways, then he says that Sasha took a few days off just to take her mind off of it, and also he requested for more fire extinguishers to be a thing. So that's the end of that. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you guys in a week time. Love you guys. See you soon.